Welcome CSC 235 to exercise 2B, and I'm calling it 2B because I already have an ex3 planned out, so we might have to go BC for a while before I get there, but I wanted to continue what we were doing in ex2, that's why this is ex2B, and we're still going to be using the date object a little bit, and we're going to be using some conditional statements, and we're going to be using some logical operators and comparison operators. And it's basically going to confirm your age, confirm you're 21, just like a site that may take you to a beer site or even porn, anything like that might ask you if you're 21. We're going to also learn how to put a button on here, which is not hard to do, but we're going to have a button run the function, because if we don't have this button, a prompt is going to start up on this page, and they're kind of annoying, and we're not going to use prompts a lot, but we're going to use a window prompt in this exercise. So the way it's going to work is you're going to click on the button, and this will call the function, and then a prompt will come up, and this is built in JavaScript, and it's kind of annoying, but we're going to use this first before we get into form fields, because it's easy and it's built into JavaScript before we start working with a whole lot of HTML. And we're going to do something like enter the month you're born, and I'm going to put in November. And this is an issue too. Should you put in the number of the month or put in the name? And I thought it might be easier in a field for people, they might want to put in their name. November, May, whatever it is. So I'm going to put in that, and we could always change it and say enter the month, 1 through 12. People are familiar with that, hopefully. And then we're going to enter the date of your birthday. I'll put in mine and the year I was born. Now I'm going to lie on this and say I was born in 2001, and I'll hit OK. And it says I'm 21. So if it was November 22nd, I would be 21 based on that, based on being born in 2001. Now, how do we figure that out? Now, you could obviously take the current year and subtract, but that doesn't always work out because it doesn't take into account when your birthday is. Because if you take 2023 and subtract when I was born, it comes out to a higher date than I actually am, because my birthday is until November, and right now it's only September. So we have to take that into account. So let's look at a couple things we're going to do here. We're still going to use the date object, and we're still going to get the date, the month, and the full year. And like I said, we're going to use a string of the months first. Now, before we were converting numbers to a string, we're actually going to do the opposite and convert strings back to numbers, and we're actually going to use them as numbers so that we can compare if it's greater than or less than, if it's what point of the year is it in, because 11 would be the highest number of the year. So you'd have to know that when you're dealing with the month. Also, when you're dealing with the day, you'd want to make sure you were not at a certain day yet, because that would mean your birthday wasn't there yet, if that's when your birthday is. And you also want to know about the year. So we're going to do all that. We're going to do a little bit of math in here. We're going to do variables. We're going to do reassigning variables. We're going to do a prompt. And we're going to do some comparisons here. We're going to use these logical operators just in case somebody spells something wrong. Now, there's different ways around this, and that's why we go through these exercises, because we could always try something a little more efficient. Maybe we can convert it to all uppercase or something, and then whatever they type in, you don't have to worry about it. But for now, I just put in a capital J and a small j, so whatever they type in works. There's other ways to work with that. And this actually has, all these things here to convert it back to a certain number. So there may be another way to do that that's more efficient. And as we work through it, maybe we'll figure that out and try to work with less code. That's what we try to do in these kind of early exercises, is kind of do something that seems more logical and then say, hey, how can we make this more efficient? How can we do it so there's less code? Because more code, more chance for mistakes and more chances of spelling something wrong. And then you're pouring through code saying, what did I do wrong? And you miss some little thing in here. So we're going to try to keep our code as efficient as possible. And then we're going to have to do some other stuff as little errors come up, parse int, a little hint of something that's going to come up, because we're going to have a string when we do a prompt, and we can't subtract or add to a string because it's a string, it's not a number. So a couple things we'll face here. Sometimes you could use console log just to say, hey, what's going on here? It's not working correctly, or it doesn't seem to, and you could kind of see what's happening. And that's how I saw that it was just adding a date, numbers together and going 2001-21. It was just adding the numbers, concatenating them, and not actually doing math. And then we'll also do a add event listener so that the button can actually run this, so we don't have window prompts coming up right away. So we're going to run through this kind of from scratch, and it's meant to be a formative kind of exercise where you're kind of learning as we go. So if you're looking at just, hey, where are the instructions? I just want to run through this. I don't want you to do that. I want us to be a learning kind of exercise here as we go through some of this. Eventually we'll have challenges and we'll have exercises. We'll all ask you to do things based on what you already know and what we've already learned. But for here, I want this to be kind of a building block of what we're doing in JavaScript before we move on to forms or anything like that. So that's what we're going to do. Again, just to review and start with this button. And I'll use my daughter's age, my youngest daughter, and she was born in August. So I'll put in August. Her date is 31st, and she was born in 2004. So she should not be 21. Sorry, you are not 21. So sometimes this will keep you from going to another page or getting into a website or whatever, but it should do this correctly. So that's why we'll probably use don't just use your own. Maybe you're close to 21 or you're right almost 21, but we'll use other birthdays as well. And then we'll also figure out, would it be better to just put in a number for a month? Is that better, or just typing in your month? And also, remember, you could misspell a month. November, if it's your month, you probably wouldn't misspell it, but people type wrong. So that brings up another issue that may be a problem as well. So we may need to fix that. So this is meant to be something that we're going to kind of work on, and maybe there'll be a 2C too, where we'll make it more efficient, or maybe you'll do something to make it a little bit better. Maybe you'll be like, hey, we don't need to do this. Let's just do something else. And that's good, because that's how you're learning. That's how you're kind of, using those logical steps and becoming more of a programmer when you're like, hey, we don't need to do this. Why don't we just do that? That'll work for everything that we're doing, especially if we're working with web files and CSS files, all that kind of stuff built in. We want to keep this stuff as short and as efficient as possible. And also what we're doing here is going to help us doing these comparisons when we're actually validating forms and doing things like that with our JavaScript when we start building a complete kind of form validation. So we're going to start that next. So I'm just going to do that in part 2. We'll just stop here for part 1 of ex2b, and part 2 we'll start building this from scratch.